So today is Saturday, February 1st. Happy February. And this is the first episode of our podcast, The Critical Conversation, where we're working to examine political and cultural issues critically. My name is Andrew, and I'm joined here by my co-hosts Ted and Liam.
Hello there.
Hello.
So 2020 isn't really off to that great of a start, is it?
Yeah, no, I mean, we got Kobe's death. We got, Australia on fire.
Yeah, that's... I heard estimated 1 billion animals dead.
Yeah, that's
sad.
There's also this new deadly spreading virus going around.
Well, the thing is, though, the coronavirus, I think that's a little bit overplayed
Oh, yeah?
by a lot of people. It's certainly a very bad thing, and many people have died from it, and those people will need our prayers, and even, actual donations would help them. I heard that Boeing is donating 250,000 face masks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've also just finished January. So
Happy Black History Month.
Yeah. For first episode, we were just looking over just recent political things to be speculating on, and the recent thing that happened yesterday was Brexit.
Yep. On January 31st at 11 p.m. This is British time, so it's 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the U.S. Finally Brexit has happened. For those of you who don't know, Brexit is for the past 47 years, the United Kingdom has been part of the European Union, and as of just yesterday, last night, as of recording this, they are no longer part of the European Union. Initially they voted to leave the European Union back all the way in 2016, but they finally got it done.
So how do you think that them leaving this union is good for Britain?
Well, for Britain specifically, it brings back national sovereignty. Before they would, if they wanted to make any serious economic or political decisions, they'd have to run it by with the EU first, which already is like, I wouldn't be very happy if, let's say, in America we voted for Trump and we want to close off our borders. If we had to first ask other nations if we can do that first.
Right, that's the context.
That takes away national sovereignty, and they want that back. Now they do.
So I know that this was led by Boris Johnson. Obviously, they got their vote in Parliament. How is this? What are the party lines? How would we relate that to party lines in America?
So the Tory party, which is the primary Brexiteer party, they're a right wing party. At least in in the American terms, they're not exactly Republican. They don't share all the same beliefs. They're a little farther right in some places and a little farther left in others. But they were the major supporters of Brexit, and the other party is the Labour Party. Now this, based on the name Labour, you can tell it's they're very heavily focused on socialism, a cultural Marxist party.
Right. So how do they implement their Marxism really in protests and just the way they work? If they were employing Marxism so much as an actual political party, wouldn't they be further down the path of Venezuela or another socialist country?
Well, just because you want Marxism doesn't mean you can make it happen. They were culturally Marxist in a lot of ways, which is the farthest progressive. It's progressive politics when it comes to culture. For example, they were supporting of mass migration to the United Kingdom, which has now meant that London, the capital city of UK, is now only 45% English.
Right. I did.
Crazy to think.
They are being just heavily.
They were very supportive of immigration.
Yes. Even the mayor of London is a Muslim. I don't believe he's an immigrant, but he's a Muslim.
I think his parents were, but we have to double check that. That's not nearly as important. But the fact is that the Labour Party has had their largest loss since seats that have been held for almost 100 years now have been lost.
So would you say this is more of like a conservative movement happening?
Oh, yes. Not as much conservative as it is populist versus globalist. This was a huge win for populism, and you can see it in the rest of the world. Donald Trump he's politically considered a right-wing populist, and the fact that he won in the United States.
Would you classify Boris Johnson as a type of populist?
Oh, absolutely, he's a populist.
Okay.
He's for the British people. He's for national sovereignty, and he believes that the UK should be their own nation, not held to the rules and regulations of the European Union, who their leaders within the European Union are not actually elected.
Right.
They get their job. They're bureaucrats, and they have an enormous amount of power for someone who's not elected. That's
Right.
something that's not democracy. That's tyranny.
Mm-hmm. So just for some context, the Labor Party would be more similar to the Democrats over here in America,
Well, yeah.
or
Very
the
much so, yeah.
rising voice for democratic socialism, that is.
Well, yeah, they definitely are in support of socialists. The leader of their party, Jeremy Corbyn, he's been
Mhm.
the leader of their party for a while now.
Right.
After Theresa May stepped down,
Mhm.
and he's a major supporter of a lot of left wing ideologies, and he was the leader when it came to resisting Brexit. His group back in June 28th, 2016, he is quoted as saying, "Today's vote on Brexit has no constitutional legitimacy." And later on saying,
Right.
"Sorry, but we live in," when being asked why they will not allow Boris Johnson to initiate Brexit, he said, "Sorry, but we live in a democracy, and the government has to be responsible to Parliament," which is very interesting that he would not take a democratic vote of the people, but favors the Parliament's vote so as more powerful.
So it almost seemed that he's employing almost the buzzword of democracy when it more fits his agenda.
Oh, absolutely. Very hypocritical use of democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Something you see all over the place.
Right. Well, that sort of leads us into our topic for today, which is the two-faced culture, and particularly that we're seeing in the media. Not only this example of the undermining of democracy, but just really understanding that the same thing is happening everywhere. It's happening in America as well. We've actually got a few examples of that. We found the first and the most prominent to be just the recent comparison of the way that these more left-leaning, these Democrats and these socialists really bring children into politics, sadly, that we've come to that in America, but they use it in many similar ways, and then they turn the hypocrisy when it comes to accusing other political opponents of the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Nick Sandman, one of the Covington kids who sued CNN for $275 million, and CNN settled the lawsuit. But the things that CNN, I think it was like 43 minutes of straight coverage on one kid just for staring at a Native American.
And when we say hypocrisy of media, we're specifically talking about news stations such as CNN, correct?
Yep.
Right.
And I think that media hypocrisy isn't a simply partisan issue. I think it can be seen in other stations
definitely,
as well.
And it's definitely on both sides.
Right, exactly.
You know,
gone are the days when the media just reported on the facts.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because nowadays it's more of the more people you get to view your articles, and the more people who view the news, then the more money you get. And so they're not trying to just report on it anymore. They're trying to get people to see it.
Yeah, that's it. I think that's a change in the way that we view our media. Whereas before, the news stations like this were when they were newspapers, they were subscription based. So they didn't need a ton of people to read it. They just needed people to be consistently subscribed. But now, as it's view based, means that most of their money comes from advertisers when people view it, which means that they must attract as many people as possible. So they're going to blow things out of proportion to do so.
Yeah. Another more US based example of just bias, just pure two-facedness, was exemplified really by Times magazine, in that they have spoken out much in the past about the use of democracy in the same way that James Corbyn did, in saying that
Jeremy Corbyn,
that the whole process in the UK was not democratic. And then you look at Times, they put out a poll for their Person of the Year thing. I mean, what does that really do? They put out a poll for this. And
I mean, it used to be credible. It used to be that a lot of powerful people or political figures would want to be Person of the Year. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It was something, just like the Nobel Prize used to be. It was something that used to be very valued.
And now, basically, they this isn't a huge example of an undermined democracy, but it is democracy nonetheless. They put out this poll saying who should be nominated Person of the Year. They've got Donald Trump, a few percent. They've got the Hong Kong protesters at 96% to be voted People of the Year. And then they have teenage Swedish activist Greta Thunberg with 1% of the vote. And just blowing off their poll, apparently, they give her Person of the Year. And then leading that...
I mean, I think the reason why they did that is mainly out of fear of China. China's incredibly powerful as they produce huge amounts of money for media and entertainment, as their billions of people, 1 billion people, that can view their stuff. And because the Chinese Communist Party is a one-party state, it's all-powerful. If it doesn't like what you have to say, it can just stop you, and then you lose all revenue from China.
Right.
And so I think they were too afraid to do that.
Yes, I actually saw that in the news the other day. LeBron James, he makes much of his revenue from the Chinese government, and he was actually shutting down basically anybody that was criticizing the government and the way that they're really persecuting their people.
Oh my gosh, they're absolutely persecuting their people.
I don't believe people recognize the scale of what's happening over there.
They've been taking prisoners and executing them just to harvest their organs and sell it back to...
It's terrible.
Exactly.
It's horrible. Yeah, it absolutely is. It's many people have died for...
Anyway, touching back to the U.S., in this whole Times Person of the Year situation, President Trump really went off on this whole thing going against Greta Thunberg, really, and her. He criticized her speech by saying, quote, that we had to reject the, quote, perennial prophets of doom and their predictions of the apocalypse, end quote. So, and then he also went to saying, basically trying to place Greta Thunberg, because, in my opinion, she came up here, she was incredibly, really, what it was, rude and disrespectful. I mean, it's the President of the United States. And she says she didn't want to, quote, waste her time speaking to him.
That's not something you say to the world's most powerful person.
Exactly. And it's not like it's not like it's a threat to say, oh, you don't talk about Trump or else he'll come for you or something. It's just out of respect.
Especially when you're a child speaking to an elder. The fact is that, I mean, he's an adult and she's a child. If you're gonna talk to an adult, you should do so in a respectful manner. Especially when you want his nation that he's in charge of right now to change their economy so drastically.
So you don't criticize, and you don't, basically agreeing with Trump, you don't prophesy doom of the apocalypse. You offer a solution to move forward.
Well, her solution is to completely eliminate all technology that's been developed since including the industrial revolution.
Honestly, one way this can be seen is just almost a de-civilization.
Well, yes, they
want to track back. They want less cars for their emissions, which only make up a percentage.
It's rather funny that they want to return to a time back, to return before we used carbon, like produce that much carbon.
And then also label themselves progressive.
I know. Very traditional. You want to talk about tradition.
Right.
The reason those traditions existed was because we existed in a world that wasn't able to support humanity in the same way it does. They want equality and such, but that really can't exist if you don't have modern technology. You just are forced to fit in these roles so that you can actually survive.
Building upon Greta Thunberg, a lot of this I feel like isn't necessarily her plan, because in my opinion at least, I feel like they're definitely using her as a pawn. Because, I mean, she's a kid. Let her live her life. They took her out of school.
All of her posts on Facebook were confirmed to be posted by her dad.
Exactly. Right. They pulled her out of school. So she's not going to school. She probably doesn't have nearly as many friends as she could have. Let her live her life. Let her have a childhood. You're completely stripping her. She's saying that Trump is ruining her childhood. No, her parents are. Everyone that is making her do this, they're the ones that are ruining her childhood by not letting her live her life.
Right, exactly. I think this really shows one side of the media is that they saw it as really an attack. And I know magazines like Vanity Fair really went after Trump, saying that he was jumping on the back of this little child and really just opening fire, and it was really below his status. But honestly, like I said, if she's really trying to be on the adults level, if she's really throwing herself out there, then if she can't take the criticism, she's not meant to be out there, you know?
It's the whole idea of punching up, which is a very popular topic nowadays. So.
Exactly. If she can't handle the heat, she should, get off the iceberg. It's just the idea of her putting herself out there and then believing that she is invulnerable to any kind of critique or anything.
Yeah, anyone who puts themselves in the public light must be prepared for public criticism. It's what happens. You can't say things and expect no one to react against them. I could go out in the middle of the street and start yelling things. People probably would ignore me, but
and the thing is,
I still have to be prepared that they might tell me that I'm wrong.
Yes, because if you're putting yourself out there and you're basically opening up the door for someone to have a differing opinion and to really politically come after you for that differing opinion.
Now, I believe there could be things that can be said that, as in, you shouldn't, when disagreeing with someone, you should be respectful.
Exactly. At all times. Especially if it's...
even if they're a child, you should still be respectful to their ideas.
Yeah, you shouldn't look down on someone just because of their age.
Yeah, and you can't assume that they don't know anything.
And neither should you assume that your cause gives you way to really talk smack about the President of the United States.
Well, this goes both ways. You can't... I don't think it's right to, politically, when you're disagreeing with someone politically, to bring them into it as a person, to become...
Right.
To verbally... to use words that are very unkind and to purposely try to tear them down. What I think you should do is, in that case, try to have a civilized discussion. Bring up your points and say, "Hey, I disagree with you for X, Y, and Z, and I think you're wrong."
Now this is where we really the hypocrisy of this media kicks in, because right in relation to them criticizing Trump for the quote attack on Thunberg.
They've been attacking teenagers themselves.
Exactly. They've been attacking. And here's the thing. Like I said, Greta Thunberg is putting herself out there.
Mm-hmm.
She's really opening herself up to the criticism. The thing is, these people, they went after Trump's son. And Trump's son is not putting himself out there. He's just trying to live his life.
Yeah.
And he's taking criticism without even putting himself out there to really take it. So the first example of this...
Let him be a gentle giant, man. Let him be patient. Let him be peaceful.
Speaking of giant, he's 6'5", right?
No, he's incredibly tall.
Yeah, just let him live his life, man. Just let him be, just do whatever he wants with all of his money and giant stature.
But their hypocrisy was in coming after Trump's son. This, believe it or not, is the more milder, just in bringing this child who is not, he's really a child, he's 14 years old. They're bringing this kid who's not into politics, they're bringing him into politics. And really, in this instance, making a joke at his expense. This was from Professor Pamela Karlan. Now, keep in mind, this woman is supposed to be showing class. She's supposed to be showing a level of professionality. And she says, during the impeachment hearings, quote, "Contrary to what President Trump has said, Article 2 of the Constitution does not give him the power to do anything he wants. The Constitution says there can be no titles of nobility, so while the president can name his son Baron, he can't make him a baron." And this room, of course, it erupts in laughter in the house. So like I said, it's really just a level of, she's just unprofessional, just to make a joke at this young boy's expense when he is not at all trying to open himself up to this criticism.
Yeah, I mean, it can be said, that the fact that you can make a joke, I think, but.
Mm-hmm.
Many people, if it were Trump, say, I believe that if Trump were to make a similar joke about another politician's child, he'd be attacked completely.
Exactly. That's part of the hypocrisy. But the thing is, I don't think we really would have explored this example if it had been just that. But actually, another example about an attack on Baron Trump was actually much, much worse than this. This was from Hollywood actor Peter Fonda, who, in response to Donald Trump's zero tolerance policy, where they claim, of course, that he's throwing kids in cages, which is rather inaccurate.
It was under the Obama administration that these centers were built in the first place.
Exactly. Anyway, this man, he had his tweet examined. It was deleted, but he had it examined and investigated by the CIA, because he said this about the agency. He said, quote, "We should rip Baron Trump from his mother's arms and put him in a cage with pedophiles." He wrote this in all caps.
That's disturbing to say the least.
Exactly. It's disturbing. Again, no level of professionality. This man is speaking purely off emotions. He clearly has no understanding of facts because he believes that these children are being placed in internment camps. And the thing is, here, let me put it to you this way. What do you do? Say there's a man, he's driving in his vehicle with his son, and he's under the influence of drugs. He's got no mother. The father is completely DUI. What do you do if the police pull this man over? What happens to him?
Well, you can't. You have to. Generally, the police, if they would have to arrest him, and there's nowhere else the child could go, they'd have to send the child to a orphanage, a foster home, somewhere.
Exactly.
Child Protective Services would come in because
Exactly.
they can't send him to prison with
These families come across the border, which is an existing crime in the United States. So that the parents
across the border is illegal.
Yes, exactly. The parents have to be taken to some sort of detainment. That's the law. So Trump is so far he's acting within the law. And these children, what, are you just going to release purely Mexican children into foster homes? No.
I mean, yeah, the treatment of them shouldn't be. It's not like we should execute them en masse.
Exactly.
They're not doing that. They're simply just putting them within essentially juvie. They created a juvenile detention.
Exactly. But the thing is,
when you look at the example with the DUI driver, let's say the son was also under the influence.
Exactly.
Then he'd have to be sent to juvenile detention center.
And also, people don't seem to realize that the other option here, you can't just arrest the parent and then throw the kid back over the border fence. You can't do that. Obviously, that's inhumane. In the same way that you don't arrest the father and then put the child just back in the vehicle and say,
okay, goodbye.
Yeah, exactly. Like, something has to be done. So the administration is making their option. This isn't permanent. This is not a concentration camp. And
it's meant to be a holding cell until they're prepared to deport the parents, at which point
Exactly.
they'll put the children with the parents during the deportation process.
So, just referencing Mr. Fonda's quote, they're not being put in cages with pedophiles. The pedophiles, which are being rounded up, thank God, and being detained, which is something that we can attribute to ICE, by the way, rounding up thousands of pedophiles and sex traffickers every year. This is being taken care of, and this option, it's not good, but they basically portray this as the children being ripped from the mother's arms, and the mother is so innocent, but in many cases these parents are criminals. In fact, they're doing a criminal act by bringing their children across the border.
Or even bringing themselves across the border.
Exactly. And it's really unselfish to think of, if you're caught, you're not thinking about what's going to happen to your child or the fact that you'll be separated. So this is not the fault of the administration. The administration is acting under the law. You have to do this if someone is acting outside the law. No, the only issue is finding a solution, and honestly, these detainment centers is the best working solution right now.
Yeah, it's sort of the best we can make of a difficult situation.
Mm-hmm.
The best situation would be if nobody crossed the border illegally, then we wouldn't have to detain anyone. It would be a lot easier on our system if they were to just take the route of coming legally to the United States, which granted is much harder. So is making an honest living versus stealing. It's much more difficult to do the right thing in many cases than it is to do the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
And while I understand there are people that are fleeing tyranny, because there is quite a bit of tyranny in South America currently,
Mm-hmm.
you still have to abide by the laws and regulations and customs of the nation which you wish to enter.
Right. And I think the thing is that everybody basically wants to give these people a pass because many of them work, but they're still on our welfare. They're still taking our tax dollars for their needs, and it's really an unfair burden on the rest of society to be taxed and to be paying for people that really just got here illegally, because that's the fact, is that they're aliens.
Yeah, they're illegal aliens. Honestly, it would be the best situation if they just didn't enter illegally. But we live right now in a very relative society, and so trying to decide which morality is correct is it's a bit of a pain, just because anyone will claim that their morality is best. when in reality it may not be, or it may be. That's the thing, is that because we live in a society that is in fact relative when it comes to morality, you can't make moral judgments.
Right.
So because of that, we're gonna have to use statistics and facts instead. It's gonna have to be a very
Right.
I hate to say it at times, robotic way of doing things, just because we can't bring in a moral element since there's no culturally accepted moral foundation that applies to basically everyone.
Right.
Because it's so heavily fractured.
Unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, fortunately and unfortunately. You wouldn't want, the society as a whole to have an immoral outlook on life. That would be bad.
True.
And, again, who's to say what's moral? I believe that it's what the Bible says, but that's not everyone's belief, and thus we can't exactly force everyone to coincide with our beliefs.
Right.
And so I think that it would be best to, I believe that, the capitalistic, representative republic that we have now is one that seems to work rather well when it comes to just generally what do we all believe. Okay, we'll go with this, and it's also not mob rule, which is very dangerous as well.
Right.
We ought to seek to found our society on something that we can regulate, and thus, when it comes to immigration, we must say, hey, does this benefit society as a whole, economically speaking?
Yeah. Otherwise,
or culturally speaking, and if not, then we shouldn't allow them.
Right, because otherwise these people are coming in and they're taking taxes. Some of them are working and they're making a way in the country, which is it's respectable. It's still not legal, but it's respectable.
Yeah.
But also many of them are coming in and they're living on welfare, which is I believe welfare is extremely corrupt.
Yeah, the welfare state is very dangerous for society.
Yeah, can you just exemplify a little bit for just the listeners, like, about welfare?
Well, the welfare state is currently, it's an attempt to it's a redistribution of wealth, which I can understand. There is poverty, which we need to address. But I don't know. What I believe the problem with the welfare state is that because it takes taxes from the general populace and uses that to pay for different government programs which give out free money to people. That's what it is. It's a giving away of money by the state. I believe that creates a very strong sense of entitlement, which is rather dangerous. Whereas before, most impoverished people, at least back in the 40s, would get a lot of their supplemental income from the community, like the church and their family and friends. It was also generally a lot poorer then. Now we are generally a lot wealthier than we used to be. But I think that the welfare just provides a whole multitude of problems as people become no longer, rather than taking it temporarily as something you might need to supplement your income, you now become dependent upon it.
Right, exactly.
And entitled to believe that you deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
What ends up happening is people give up on seeking to work to earn their money, instead just take what the government gives them and goes with that. It's
the same thing. Even more horrendous than the welfare system is the sanctuary cities in the United States. For those who don't really know what that is, and this is not, I promise you, this is not a hyped up, politicized version. They take in these criminals, often rapists and murderers, and they allow them to live in these cities, and often these people just go out and they commit crimes again.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there is many of the cities that have become sanctuary cities are in fact very crime ridden. I could pull up statistics in a second.
Just recently, we had this statistic about this illegal immigrant. He was a 6-time deportee. He's back. He was also accused of sexual assault and murder of an underage girl, which is very, very sad, and it's troubling, honestly, that this man was released in the sanctuary city, and then weeks later he went out and he committed 3 more murders of teenagers, and he's still at large. These people, they don't. It's basically a furthering of their agenda, because the more people that they can stamp on welfare, and the more people they can pack into these crime cities, it furthers their agenda. That's why the African American population has always historically favored the Democratic vote, because the Democrats have always been the ones to bring them in, to give them welfare, to promise them these free things, and
it just hasn't paid off in the way that it was expected.
Exactly, because you expect, just from the way it sounds, it sounds great, right? Free welfare, you got food stamps, you got all this thing.
And I find
In theory, it should be only temporary enough to bring a person out of.
Exactly, but the thing is, welfare, and honestly, the whole socialist ideology, it rests upon the presumption that humans will basically do what they're supposed to, do what they're morally good. That's the way.
It's an idealist way of looking at things.
As a matter of fact, when the U.S. was first founded, they were basically looking at different types of government to use, and they were contemplating socialism bordering communism.
Well, that hadn't yet existed, but what they were looking at was...
Well, the policies saying, like, if they said everybody, they do their fair share, and then everyone gets the same thing.
Yeah.
But the issue with all this is that it relies on each individual to do the right thing. And they found out that not everybody is going to do the right thing.
Not
and
everyone's
then
going to pay in their fair share, and not everyone's going to take their fair share.
exactly, and then you get issues like, oh, well, what happens to a man that's lazy and doesn't go out and do his part? What does he get? Does he just starve to death?
In our world, currently, if you decided you didn't want to work and we didn't have welfare, yeah, you would eventually starve, become homeless, which
Exactly.
does in fact happen in many places. But
like you said, welfare doesn't complete the dream for these people. It really... It's a promise that
it's designed to be temporary, but it isn't. It doesn't.
Exactly.
It doesn't bring you out of poverty. It's just enough to supplement you so you can find a better job.
as well as to
I mean, we
harvest
have
the
other
votes.
programs that can really help with raising your economic station.
Right, exactly.
Right, and I think
The
a lot
military
of people,
is one way that you can absolutely.
because almost anyone can apply for the military.
Right.
Yeah, you can just join the military, and then after a few years of service, it's hard work, very, very hard work, but you can raise your income to a point where you're now no longer impoverished, and you're now, in fact, in the middle class.
And I think you should work hard to make a living. You shouldn't. I don't think anyone should be able to just, do something small and get so much out of it, while other people are working so hard and getting so little out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just
now.
Now it is just the way that life works. There are people that don't do as much and make more than someone that does a lot.
Well,
because that's where capitalism comes into play, is because some people have the brighter ideas
work
and
smarter, not harder.
Exactly.
A lot of people.
That's where socialism really points a finger at capitalism and says, this man over here is working so little, and yet he's top 1%. He's a millionaire. Then this man works 9 to 5 every day at a local restaurant, and he's barely making ends meet. You say, what's the thing here? Well, that's the man putting in small amounts of work. He's using his brain.
And to be honest, becoming a millionaire is no easy task.
Yeah, it's not as easy
unless it's Downton Abbey style. You just inherit it. And even then, they have to follow a great many rules and regulations.
Right.
And
I mean, I do think inherited wealth is a legitimate form of wealth.
Yeah, absolutely. If
a lot of people disagree.
If I were to earn a large sum of money, I don't think it's wrong for me to give that to my children. They are my children after all, and you can't take your money with you when you die. So if you happen to earn a lot, why not give it to your descendants?
Mm-hmm. It's a familial right, honestly.
Yeah, it's been happening for thousands of years. I mean, you look at the Bible, Jacob inheriting his father's wealth.
Right.
And when we talk about this kind of inheritance, we're not talking about any small amount of money. This is huge plots of land and large amounts of other supplies. Possibly many servants and other things, too. Again, like you said, socialism points the finger at capitalism, saying, well, there's inequality. I believe
there's always going to be inequality.
Well, yeah, it's equality of outcome is almost impossible to
because
regulate.
What socialism and communism presupposes is that we're going to have drone automated assembly line citizens. They're all going to work the same job. They're all going to put in the same thing, and they'll all reap the same thing out. That's simply not the case. You'll have people that are brighter and make inventions and really plow ahead in society. And under socialism and communism, those means of wealth and production are owned by the government. Whereas in capitalism, you have your own personal
freedom.
right to thrive.
Yeah, and it's in communism. Why should I work so hard? Why should I become a scientist and develop great new technologies and work 40 hours a week
if I can
just
only work as much as the guy down the street and get the exact same amount of
work
money.
like an hour a day as a janitor or something, they'd just be like, oh yeah, I get the same amount as that guy who works 80 hours a week.
Yeah. Also, morally, capitalism is a way of it's dignity to be able to put in
to give people the freedom to do as they please with what they
instead
earn.
of to feel like an
Mhm.
automated drone that's just another bee buzzing in the beehive of society.
Yeah, I mean, there is certain things to be said about, working a simple job and having a simple life. It's
It's
nothing to scoff at, nothing
Exactly.
bad about that.
And because if that's what you want to do, then capitalism it gives you
Capitalism
that right.
allows you to.
Right.
Entirely.
Honest work is honest work.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But being, having the freedom to decide that this is what I want to do with my life is something that, we shouldn't have that regulated by the government, because that's something that, again, we've seen that the government can be very hypocritical. They seek their own power, no matter how much you want what you want. You could the British people wanting to vote for Brexit and doing so, and then
So
being
what this is
denied by the
about,
government.
what this is about is democracy.
In a sense,
It's like if these people, if a group of people in a nation decide that they want to do capitalism, that's their right to make wealth that way. In the same way that
you're looking at it from an American perspective of rights.
Yeah.
right.
We're one of the only nations in the world that has the same style of rights that we have, where we can say, hey, that's our right to do this. Well, most of the world, that's not their right to do that. In China, you have no rights to do what you want. You do what you're told if you're told to do something. Now,
And that's
most
an
of the time, the
increasingly
government doesn't really care when it comes to what you want to do. But there are times when they do, and then you don't have a choice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think another area that we were actually able to really just explore and look down on, really the extreme double standards, particularly in this case, again presented by the left, is in this whole extreme controversy of blackface.
Oh,
that's a very difficult one.
It's
Very real historical elements to that.
Exactly, yeah.
And then,
but it's really become such a buzzword these days, and it's become so, just politicized. And just a disclaimer: we don't think anybody should be.
we don't encourage blackface.
Yeah, no, because it's done to portray a race a certain way. In the same way that you don't want to go around appropriating an Asian culture, or for that matter, a white culture. It's just
now that's a very interesting subject for another day, is cultural appropriation. Because you can't. I don't think it's wrong to appreciate another culture and to dress up the way that they do.
Oh, definitely not. And I think it's sickening that people would get shut down for doing that.
Yeah, if you genuinely admire that culture, then why not dress in the way that they do?
But anyway, to take this
back on track,
this more racial issue back to our discussion about hypocrisy. There was a Republican senator, I believe she was from Arkansas. Her name was Kay Ivey, who 50 years ago wore blackface in a parade, I believe, and there were protests, there was lines outside her office calling for her resignation, obviously from the left, from obviously a larger African American crowd just calling for her to step down because of all that, and because it was deemed as racism. And then the interesting thing is that there's definitely the same crowd, they stayed quiet when Virginia Governor Ralph Northam was in a picture, not only of a man in blackface, but next to a man in KKK robes.
Yeah.
Of course, coincidentally, he forgot which one he was in the yearbook picture. But but the thing was, the same crowd, the same general populace, was saying, we need to move on. We need to forgive him so that he can continue to help us with his agenda, and which is really hypocritical, because honestly, that's just a double standard. It's forgiving someone of that when it fits your political gain. And it wasn't just him either. They also let it slide with the Liberal Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, as well as Mark Herring, the Democratic Attorney General of Virginia, who also wore blackface. And then they just allow these people to basically
No.
just walk free of accusation.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I mean,
I believe that it's. I don't think that we should be going after people for something they've done so far in the past.
I agree. Like, I don't think that they should have gone after Kay Ivey in the same way that I don't think really people should have gone after Ralph Northam or Mark Herring.
Yeah, it's something that was culturally acceptable. When we take cultural ideals from modern times and you apply them retroactively, of course you're going to find things in the past.
Yeah, but these people have no
Walt
timeline.
Disney was he was in fact racist by today's standards,
Right.
but to apply today's standards retroactively, those standards didn't exist back then. You didn't act that way. You acted
Right.
differently because that's just how everyone did.
Right, exactly.
I think it's just a dangerous thing to do, to apply modern cultural
'Cause it
standards
eliminates-
retroactively.
It eliminates any logical timeline or fact that things are different back then than they are today.
Things change, and you can't hold people accountable to things.
Because
it's like-
it was done in a
Yeah,
past
it's like
society.
changing the law and then saying anyone who's done this that is
Exactly.
now illegal in the past must now be arrested. Well,
Exactly.
it didn't used to be illegal. Why, like, if during the Prohibition, for example, they said anyone who's had alcoholic beverages in the past will now be arrested. It's
Yeah,
like,
but that didn't mean that 40 years later, when alcohol was back on the market, that they were saying, "Oh, you drank alcohol 30 years ago, therefore we need to punish you now."
or even my point was that when you change cultural standards and cultural morality, you can't apply that to the past in the same way that you would apply it to now.
Mhm.
Now, if somebody were to walk out on stage in blackface today, that's a little bit different. Especially if they understood the cultural standards today. It's
Mhm.
just not appropriate for how we behave nowadays. But in the past, it was deemed appropriate. These people they didn't lose their jobs back then because it wasn't deemed as evil as it is today.
Right. So, yeah, these are all really just standards of not only a media but also a society that really only persecutes and criticizes when it fits political gain.
Like
Right.
you take the LGBT community, for example, and they're getting all this because people are saying that these people in the LGBT community are getting persecuted everywhere around the world. They're getting raped, murdered, all because they're LGBT. And the same thing is happening to Christians, for
Exactly.
example. And I don't see anybody talking about it like
Mhm.
that. Like, there are Christians out there who are getting persecuted just because of their Christianity.
There was a Nigerian pastor just the other week who was
who-
beheaded.
Right,
actually.
just because he was a Christian.
Exactly.
And I don't see anybody talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the cultural. Right now, even if most of our culture is opposed to that, most of the people within the United States would be opposed to that. Right now, what we have is a sort of a hegemony over the
Right.
over the Hollywood, over the most news organizations, over large portions of the government, over complete control over academia. What you have is very cultural Marxist ideals
Mhm.
that are very powerfully present in these places, and they completely push out anyone who disagrees with them. They decide what is right and what is wrong, and if you disagree with them, you're now evil.
Right,
It can
exactly.
be seen in many places, all over,
Mhm.
all over. On
Yeah.
campuses especially, you can see a lot of this. They don't, they'll punish you for things that they believe are wrong.
And even things that you did in a different light of culture,
Yeah,
like
you can-
years ago.
Well, yeah, even like today writing, there was with the whole "it's okay to be white" scandal, as it's being called.
Yeah.
When people would post signs that simply said "it's okay to be white." Now you can see there's nothing wrong with that statement. Very simple. It's okay to be white. Okay, great, good for you. It's okay to be black. It's okay to be Asian.
Exactly.
It's fine. But it was not seen that way on campuses, and it was the signs were torn down. Even just recently, there was a large one. Writing was about 20 feet tall, I believe, and they painted it on a wall overnight, and it was being called a hateful display of racism. And,
Yeah, but
there was no other race mentioned. Just purely, it's okay to be white. Very
Mhm.
simple.
And it's just like, the same can go for gender too, men and women. Like, if I were to say to a feminist, go outside, in a city, look at all the buildings, they were built by men.
Not all of them.
Well, most of them, she would most likely take that as a sexist assault.
But
But if
again,
she said-
that's just understanding that was cultural
right,
back
but
in that time.
But also, if she were to say, like, look around, everybody you see was born by a female. I don't see that as wrong at all.
Right.
Just as like I don't see saying that everything was built by man as wrong.
Mm-hmm.
People take things like it's okay to be white and say that they're not okay, but they take other statements that are good for them and say that those are perfectly fine, even though it's basically the exact same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think these are all just really good examples. That's the gist of what we had for today. Just looking at really a two-faced culture and a two-faced media. So you can subscribe to us on YouTube by going to The Critical Conversation. You can also give us thoughts, questions. You could come in for a guest appearance. You can appeal for all that to our email at thecriticalconversationpodcast@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
We appreciate you coming on and listening. If you're on YouTube, you can go ahead and like, subscribe,
and leave a comment.
comment on anything you'd like to see change, any questions you have. We can get right to those. Thank you.